Right, so the United Kingdom's counter-terrorism laws have been the subject of intense debate of late, especially where it has come to the proscription of Palestine Action. They are amongst the most draconian of their type in the democratic world, permitting broad surveillance, detention, and proscription powers, all in the name of security. So, security and democracy kind of rubbing each other the wrong way here, and we're all paying the price for that. Precisely because of this, though, a constitutional safeguard was created: the Office of the Independent Reviewer of Terrorism Legislation. Its purpose is to reassure the public and Parliament that these powers are not being used capriciously or politically, but are subject to independent scrutiny. The independence of the reviewer is not a mere formality, therefore. It's the very lifeblood of the office. If the reviewer is compromised in any way, or is seen to be compromised in any way, the system is not only weakened, it just becomes a complete façade, an absolute betrayal of public trust that disguises political repression as neutrality. This week, the legitimacy of that post, that neutrality, has it seems been tested to breaking point. Jonathan Hall, KC, is the current independent reviewer, and he penned a column in The Observer defending the government's decision to prescribe Palestine Action, the direct action network that has been targeting Israeli arms manufacturers in Britain and has been prescribed as a terror group rather than prosecuted for criminal damage, which of course they very much do carry out. That has gone hand in hand with direct action protests throughout the history of such things, after all. But in that article, though, he described Palestine Action activists as serious saboteurs who had abandoned democratic avenues, insisted that proscription would not chill lawful support for Palestine, and warned that leniency towards such groups could even open the door to Islamic State supporters flying their flags openly on British streets. But if it gets wind of Foreign Secretary David Lammy shaking hands with Syria's unelected de facto president, him being a former Al-Qaeda operative, of course, well, I just don't know what Hall would do you? Right, so Jonathan Hall, KC, and his Observer article. On its own, the article was quite startling. It moved the role of the reviewer from impartial, independent observer, as it supposedly needs to be, as it must be, to a public advocate for what Yvette Cooper and the Home Office has done here, aligning himself openly with the Home Secretary's controversial decision to prescribe Palestine Action, now the subject of a judicial review, of course. But subsequent revelations made it even more troubling. You see, Hall is married into the family of Lord John Dyson, the former Master of the Rolls and Justice of the Supreme Court, who is, as it happens, a patron of UK Lawyers for Israel, UKLFI. And we've spoken about UKLFI on this channel before, haven't we? It's a legal lobbying organisation notorious for its lawfare campaigns against pro-Palestine activists, charities and unions. Its tactics have been criticised across the legal and human rights community for suppressing free speech and abusing regulatory processes. And its charity arm is now under investigation by the Charity Commission, because charities are supposed to be apolitical, and I'll enjoy watching those lawyers try and prove that now to keep that status going forwards. But the combination of Hall's Observer article, his undisclosed family tie to UKLFI, and the broader political context of the Palestine Action prescription raises profound questions, therefore. Was this decision truly about public safety, or was it about silencing dissent against Britain's complicity in Israel's war on Gaza? Why did Hall, supposedly the independent watchdog as he is, step forward as an advocate for that? Surely he's completely compromised himself, hasn't he? Why did mainstream media outlets not treat his family connection as a scandal worthy of serious attention? And in fact, why have every single one of them, bar none, completely ignored this story? What does this episode reveal about the structural bias that pervades both the application of terrorism law and its coverage? Palestine Action, of course, is a direct action campaign group, as we now know, founded in 2020. I've spoken about it before, regular viewers will know anyway, with the explicit mission of shutting down the operation of Elbit Systems and other companies complicit in supplying Israel's military. Its actions have included, as we know, occupying factory roofs, locking onto gates, breaking into offices, and vandalising property with red paint that symbolises blood, notably a couple of hedge fund-owned planes that the RAF lease having been targeted, because privatisation means the rich own everything, even our defence capacity in some instances, as became clear here. But these tactics are confrontational, certainly. They're disruptive. They are often unlawful under criminal law. Yet they are intentionally non-violent as well. The group has consistently targeted property, not people. It's never been accused of seeking to cause physical harm. And yet under the Terrorism Act of 2000, terrorism is defined as an action designed to influence government or international organisations for political purposes, where that action involves serious violence, damage to property that endangers life, or create serious risks to public safety. Palestine Action's activities, however militant, do not rise to that threshold in my view. Their occupations, spray painting and sabotage, are political protest in the tradition of the suffragettes, anti-apartheid activists and climate campaigners. Though, of course, the caveat is, having just said that, I cannot express support for this group, lest I have the fuzz knock on my door. And, well, there wouldn't be any more content for a while, would there? So let's not go there. Anyway, British courts have repeatedly acquitted PA activists, haven't they? They've recognised that their actions have been driven by conscience and aimed at preventing greater crimes, namely the supplying of weapons for use in war crimes in Gaza. Nevertheless, of course, the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, announced that Palestine Action would be proscribed as a terrorist organisation and has doubled down on her decision repeatedly. This was unprecedented. Never before had a domestic protest movement, whose tactics were firmly within the tradition of direct action, been branded a terrorist group. Reports quickly surfaced from the Joint Terrorism Analysis Centre, JTAC, the professional body responsible for assessing terrorist threats. They had not actually recommended a proscription, all courtesy of a leak from that department, a leak report that they'd produced, which there is little reason to disbelieve. If true, this meant that the Home Secretary had therefore overruled her own expert advisers to push ahead with this, though. So instead of a security decision, proscription now looks like a political gesture here, a move to silence a movement that's proven effective at disrupting Britain's military-industrial relationship with Israel. The decision was quickly challenged in the courts. The High Court granted Palestine Action's co-founder Huda Amori permission to seek judicial review, with judges noting the serious risk of chilling effect on lawful Palestine solidarity. This was a very significant development because it directly contradicted the government's claim that the ban would not inhibit lawful political expression. It also undermined Jonathan Hall's later assertion in The Observer that proscription did not endanger the right to campaign for Palestine. Thus, even before Hall entered the fray in this argument, the proscription of Palestine Action was already highly questionable. It appeared to be the state punishing a movement not because of genuine security risk, but because of its political effectiveness in challenging arms companies linked to Israel. Jonathan Hall's statutory position is a very clear one. Appointed in 2019, he serves as the independent reviewer of terrorism legislation. That word, independent, is key. His mandate is to examine the operation of terrorism laws and report to Parliament, providing independent scrutiny. As the government announcement of his appointment makes clear, he is expected to inform public and parliamentary debate, but always from the vantage point of impartiality. His credibility depends on not being aligned with government policy or partisan agendas. So when Hall published an article in The Observer this week titled, "We Can't Shrink from Taking a Stance on Palestine Action," in it he advanced three core claims. First, he argued that consistency demanded that Palestine Action be treated like other proscribed groups. He drew analogies to Irish organisations during the Troubles and warned that exempting PA would create an unacceptable precedent. Second, he described PA as serious saboteurs who would abandon democratic avenues, thus crossing the line into terrorism. And third, he insisted that the proscription would not prevent or chill lawful support for Palestine, distinguishing between support for the cause and support for the organisation. He also suggested that loosening terrorism law to exclude PA could enable Islamic State supporters to fly their flags openly in Britain, which is just nuts. These arguments were, to say the least, deeply flawed. The appeal to consistency is totally misplaced. Consistency requires treating like cases alike, not collapsing distinctions between armed paramilitary groups and non-violent direct action movements. The suffragettes, for example, they engaged in serious property damage, yet they were not treated as terrorists. The labelling of PA as serious saboteurs exaggerates their actions and ignores the tradition of disruptive protest in British political history. The claim that proscription does not chill lawful support is contradicted by judicial findings, which acknowledge a real risk of chilling effect. And the invocation of Islamic State is just patently false, offensively so. Equating activists attempting to prevent war crimes with a group that has committed mass civilian killings is both intellectually and morally bankrupt. More fundamentally, the very act of publishing this article compromised Hall's office completely. As independent reviewer, he was tasked with analysing proscription in his official reports to Parliament. By intervening in the media to defend the government's position, he shifted from observer to advocate. He became part of the controversy he was supposed to scrutinise. Independence depends not only on reality, but also on appearance. By choosing advocacy, Hall undermined both. Hall's Observer article therefore did not reflect impartial legal analysis, but rather advocacy aligned with government and pro-Israel lobbying narratives. Because Hall chose to act not as an impartial reviewer, but as a government advocate, his words cannot be read as neutral analysis anymore. They function instead as political cover, and they transform the proscription of Palestine Action from a security measure into a calculated act of repression. So the significance of Hall's Observer article becomes all the more clear when viewed alongside his personal connections. Hall married Michelle Dyson in 2000. Michelle Dyson is the daughter of Lord John Dyson, former Master of the Rolls and Justice of the Supreme Court. But Lord Dyson is not merely a retired judge, you see, because he is also a patron of UK Lawyers for Israel, UKLFI. UKLFI is a legal advocacy organisation formed in 2011, and its mission is to defend Israel by using legal tools to suppress criticism and activism. As Novara Media noted last month, UKLFI has pursued the NHS, universities, trade unions and charities with complaints designed to sever ties to Palestinian organisations. It has pressured universities to cancel events, targeted charities like Medical Aid for Palestine, pushed regulatory bodies to investigate groups deemed too critical of Israel. The Law Gazette has documented its aggressive interventions in a piece from April of last year, and human rights advocates have condemned its tactics as chilling free expression. The presence of Lord Dyson, one of Britain's most senior retired judges, as a patron lends UKLFI establishment credibility, but it also ties Jonathan Hall through marriage to this organisation. Now, this link does not mean that Hall himself is a member of UKLFI, of course. Nobody is claiming that here. But independence is not only about fact, it is about perception too. Under the Nolan principles of public life, holders of public office are required to demonstrate integrity, honesty and openness. Now, I'm a town councillor. These also apply to me. If a close member of my family, say a sibling or a child or one of my parents if they were still alive, came forward with a planning application, for example, now I'd be expected to recuse myself from that application when it was heard. It's very black and white in that respect. When it goes to wider family, it can be a little bit more grey. I would choose to recuse if an uncle or a cousin did similarly, or an in-law. But that would be my choice because of my conscious awareness of perception. And the fact I have a huge extended family, frankly, and seem to be related to half the town at times, it seems. No jokes about Cornwall, please. But the point is, if a family tie to an organisation creates even the appearance of conflict, it should be disclosed. By defending the proscription of Palestine Action without declaring his familial link to a UKLFI patron, Hall failed that test in my view, and I would argue that as a supposed independent observer whose impartiality is literally key to his role, he has a heightened responsibility here. The legal doctrine of apparent bias is instructive here too. Hall's a lawyer, I'm sure he'd love this. In Porter versus McGill in 2001, the House of Lords, as a result, held that the question is whether a fair-minded and informed observer, having considered the facts, would conclude there's a real possibility of bias. Now, this case concerned the auditor's report into Westminster City Council under then-leader Dame Shirley Porter. The allegation was that the Conservative-run council had pursued a policy of selling off council houses in marginal wards, so-called designated sales, to create more Conservative voters, the so-called Homes for Votes policy. The district auditor, John McGill, investigated and concluded that this was unlawful gerrymandering that had caused a financial loss to the council. The Lords ended up upholding the district auditor's finding that Shirley Porter and David Weeks, her deputy, had indeed acted unlawfully in adopting the designated sales policy for electoral advantage. And as a result, they were found jointly and severally liable for £36.1 million, which was later reduced on appeal. So applying that Lord's result here, and considering his father-in-law sits in the Lords, the facts are rather stark. The independent reviewer of terrorism legislation defended the proscription of a pro-Palestine campaign group while being married into the family of a patron of a lobbying organisation devoted to defending Israel by suppressing such activism. A fair-minded observer would certainly consider that there was a real possibility of bias there then, wouldn't they, surely? The case is further complicated by allegations that have been made by former diplomat Craig Murray. Now, Murray has claimed that Hall has visited Israeli counter-terrorism bodies, spends family holidays in Israel, and engages in vigilante synagogue guarding, which is a little bit weird. Who exactly is he guarding it from? Where Murray's claims remain not independently verifiable, though I've no reason not to take Murray's word on such things, I find him extremely credible, of course. He's a former UK ambassador, after all, as well as an established journalist. What is established beyond doubt is Hall's family connection to Lord Dyson and Lord Dyson's role as a patron of UK LFI. That link alone is enough to create an overwhelming perception of bias without relying on any unproven detail. Even if Murray's allegations were to be disregarded entirely, the appearance of partiality remains nailed on by the confirmed Dyson UK LFI connection. Perhaps the most telling aspect of this affair is the silence of the mainstream media, though. The Guardian has reported on the judicial review of Palestine Action's prescription, but it's not connected Hall's family tie to UK LFI. The BBC, the Times, the Financial Times, they've ignored it altogether. They all have. Only alternative outlets such as Squawkbox have reported the connection. So this silence is revealing. With the independent reviewer linked by family to a Russian lobbying group or a Chinese or Iranian legal network, it would be a front-page scandal, and we know it would be. So the selective silence demonstrates structural bias when it comes to Israel. The press is reluctant to expose pro-Israel influence within the legal establishment, and in doing so it fails in its role as a democratic watchdog of society, much as Hall has failed in his duty to remain independent and impartial. The consequence is a far wider accountability vacuum. The government has politicised terrorism law, the reviewer has compromised his independence, and the media has refused to hold either of them to account for it. Citizens are left without a credible check on the use of the most coercive state powers, therefore. So what should the proper course of action have been then? Well, the government should have, from the beginning, respected JTAC's professional assessment by the look of it, and not prescribed Palestine Action at all. That leaked report I've got no reason to doubt whatsoever. A leak is a leak, isn't it? Leaks happen because, well, that's stuff that the government or the establishment don't want us to know that we end up finding out about. That move alone makes it a distinct possibility the judicial review could go against the government come November, and I don't think Yvette Cooper would survive that. Criminal damage can be prosecuted under ordinary law. Terrorism law was never necessary, therefore. The principle of proportionality required that proscription be used only against genuine terrorist threats, and I fail to see how that has been proven where it comes to Palestine Action. Jonathan Hall should have confined his analysis to his reports in Parliament. That's his job, that's his remit. If he wished to speak publicly, then he should have declared his family connection to Lord Dyson and UK LFI. Better still, he should have just recused himself from commenting on this particular case, on the prescription of a group so directly tied to his family's lobbying orbit. And more broadly, the independent reviewer's office should be reformed to require the publication of registers of interest, including family ties. Prescription orders should be subject to stronger parliamentary scrutiny with input from civil society, not just ministerial fiat. It's a completely undemocratic process. And the media should treat conflicts of interest in the counter-terrorist sphere with the same seriousness they do in any other field. The Hall affair reveals deeper truths about Britain's political order. Terrorism law is being weaponised not primarily to protect public safety, but to suppress political dissent. Palestine Action is not a terrorist threat. There is no evidence to back up that assertion, or JTAC would have provided it. The leaked JTAC report shows nothing of the sort. It's a disruptive protest movement, yes. Its prescription reflects the state's desire to protect its alliance with Israel and the profits of the arms trade, though, not to guard the public. The independence of oversight mechanisms is horribly fragile. If the independent reviewer can be compromised by undisclosed family ties to lobbying organisations, then independence is an illusion. The Nolan principles are rendered hollow if they are not enforced. Apparent bias erodes trust not only in the reviewer, but in the entire counter-terror framework. And the media's silence compounds this problem. By refusing to cover conflicts of interest linked to Israel, mainstream outlets shield the government from scrutiny and become all the less trustworthy when it comes to this issue. They become complicit in the very politicisation they're supposed to be exposing, that real journalists actually do. The implications for democracy are grave, therefore. If dissent against Britain's role in foreign wars can be criminalised as terrorism, and if oversight mechanisms are compromised, then civil liberties are in peril themselves. The prescription of Palestine Action is not an isolated case. It's a precedent that can be used against climate activists and trade unionists or any group that threatens entrenched power if it gets upheld. Jonathan Hall's Observer article defending the prescription of Palestine Action was a watershed moment. It transformed the independent reviewer from impartial watchdog into government advocate. His failure to disclose a family link to Lord Dyson, a patron of UK LFI, compounds that problem. It's not the problem itself, it compounds it. The subsequent media silence revealed a deeper structural bias. Where pro-Israel influence is shielded from scrutiny, the prescription of Palestine Action was never about security. It was about silencing a movement that effectively challenged Britain's complicity in Israel's war on Gaza. The whole affair demonstrates how terrorism law has been politicised, oversight has been compromised, and democracy eroded for it. The Dyson UK LFI connection is a matter of record, it's not speculation. On that fact alone, the appearance of bias is nailed on. Allegations about Hall's personal sympathies may deepen suspicion, but they are not needed to see the scandal. The independent reviewer is bound by family to a pro-Israel lobby network, even as he defends the banning of Palestine Action. Oversight compromised by lobbying ties is no oversight at all. It's a cover-up. It's a scandal hiding in plain sight and a weapon in the hands of ministers determined to crush dissent. And unless these lessons are taken seriously, Britain's counter-terror regime risks becoming a tool not of public protection anymore at all, but just of political repression. The citizens of a democracy deserve better, and increasingly it's looking more and more like we're not living so much in a democracy anymore. The public deserve a reviewer who is truly independent, a government that does not abuse terrorism law for political ends, and a media willing to hold both to account. For more on that JTAC leak and why it has proven so explosive for Yvette Cooper particularly, do check out this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe if you haven't done so already, so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content, as well as spreading the word and help support the channel at the very same time, which is very much appreciated, holding power to account for ordinary working class people, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers folks.